People think jealousy only happens between partners, but with my mom, it was constant. She could make anything feel like a competition, even if it was just me getting a compliment. When I was 16, she'd criticize my clothes like she was jealous they looked better than hers. By the time I was 20, she zeroed in on my makeup, acting like I was trying to one-up her. And when I hit 25, it was my boyfriends. She'd lean in way too close, laugh just a bit too loud, touch their arm accidentally every time they were around. Whenever I called her out, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Oh, don't be so insecure, darling." I spent years trying to explain, to change it, but eventually I gave up. Then one day, my best friend said something that made me rethink everything. Let's give her exactly what she wants, attention she can't handle. I still remember that night like it stuck in my skin. I brought Jake over for the first time. He was quiet, a little nervous, trying to be polite. And then Mom started in, right from the moment we stepped inside. She looked right at him and said, "Well, aren't you handsome? Almost makes me wish I was his age." She laughed, that sharp little laugh she uses when she thinks she's being funny. Jake's face went stiff, and I swear I could feel my cheeks burning red so fast, it was like a physical heat. I wanted to sink through the floor. I tried to shove her off with a smile like, "Mom, come on." But she just turned on me next, saying, "You did good, didn't you?" Picking a real catch. Everyone was supposed to laugh, but all I felt was this horrible squeeze in my chest. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. A weird, twisted warning. Jake looked anywhere but at her. I could tell he wanted to bolt right then. I hated that. I hated that she made him feel so small, like he was a toy she was inspecting and didn't approve of. And me? I was the kid stuck holding it all together. She called it teasing. I called it sabotage dressed like charm. Every time I tried to relax, she'd throw another comment my way. Like when she whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Careful, sweetie. Don't let a pretty face distract you." Boys can break hearts, especially when they're cute. The silence after felt cold, like a trap snapping shut. I wanted to tell Jake to leave, but it felt like even saying that would make things worse. Because every little thing she said was a reminder that I wasn't enough for her, not loyal enough, not in on her joke. I wasn't supposed to be happy. I was supposed to be vigilant, suspicious. By the time she cornered us both in the kitchen trying to sell him a drink, even though he was underage, I realized this wasn't about Jake at all. It was about control, about making sure I never forgot who was really calling the shots. The hurt wasn't loud. It was quiet and sticky, like a shadow clinging to my back. I felt embarrassed, yes, but deeper than that, there was a raw kind of anger bubbling under the surface. Not just at her, but at myself for not snapping back, for not shutting it down faster. And beneath the anger was this shame. Like maybe something was wrong with me for letting someone I loved make me look so small, in front of the only person I cared to impress. Jake didn't come back after that night. We drifted apart slowly, words getting fewer, excuses getting easier. Part of me knew I was grateful, because if I hadn't lost him, Mom's teasing would have kept chipping away at me until there was nothing left. I didn't talk about any of it for years. But whenever I think back, that night is the first crack in everything that followed. The first time I realized how far she'd go, and how powerless I was to stop it. I thought maybe if I acted like it didn't bother me, things would change. But they didn't. Because sometimes the worst kind of control isn't yelling or slamming doors. It's the way someone can make you question everything, while playing it off like love. We were at some family brunch, really casual, and Mom shows up, like she always does, full of that fake warmth. As soon as she locked eyes with Jake, my new boyfriend, the way she shifted was unreal. She started with the usual compliments. "Oh, he has such a charming smile," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she reached over and placed her hand on his shoulder, real slow, like she wanted to remind everyone he belonged to her in some way. I looked over at Jake, hoping he'd pull away, but he just smiled awkwardly and nodded. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just nice, polite family behavior anymore. It wasn't flirting or those little polite moments from years ago I convinced myself were harmless. This was something else. It was dominance disguised as affection, and there was no mistaking it. Mom's eyes stayed locked on Jake as if she wanted to drain him of whatever space he had in my life. Meanwhile, I sat there feeling this thick knot in my chest. I wanted to say something, but my words caught in my throat. How do you tell your own mother to back the hell off without making everything explode? especially when she's smiling like it's all normal, like I'm overreacting. Jake was polite, like always. "Thank you, Mrs." he started to say, but Mom interrupted, putting a finger on his arm, too soft to be threatening, but heavy with meaning. "Please, call me Mom," she said, voice dripping with that fake sweetness I've grown to hate. I swear, the moment felt loud in the quiet restaurant, like everyone sensed the tension under the polite surface. I felt my jaw tighten. I caught myself staring at her hand still resting on Jake's arm, and somewhere deep down, a little voice whispered that this was breaking something between me and Jake that it already had, even if no one wanted to admit it. The frustration bubbled up, but I kept swallowing it because arguing here, now, with my mom, it felt pointless. After a few more minutes of her playing hostess, turning to others at the table like none of it mattered when I could see Jake's discomfort growing, I realized how much this scene stung. Why couldn't she just be normal? Why did she have to act the same way she did when I was a kid, when every time she did, it felt like an invisible thread tightened around my neck? I caught Jake's eye again, and he looked like he wanted to say something, anything, but he didn't. Maybe he figured it wasn't his place, or maybe he was just trying to keep peace. I envied that. I envied people who could stay calm with her because I couldn't. It just kept building inside me. The disbelief that after all these years, she still acted the same, like nothing had changed. Inside, I wanted to yell at her, tell her this time she was crossing a line she shouldn't even be near, but all I did was nurse the blend of anger and sadness that settled like a stone in my gut. The worst part was feeling trapped in this loop where she could keep invading my relationships, making my life about her without consequences. At some point, the harmless facade cracked. When she patted Jake's shoulder again, this time a little too firmly, I realized it wasn't about charm anymore. It was like she was marking territory. The realization stung the most because it meant this wasn't new behavior. It was who she was. It was who she would always be. I remember thinking, I can't keep pretending this is just her being quirky or loving in her own way. It feels like a nightmare I woke up inside after 10 years, but no matter how much I try to pull away, the weight of it pulls me back down. That afternoon, the quiet drive home was the worst. Jake didn't say much, but I could tell he was nervous around my mom now, like he had seen a side of her I never wanted him to see. And I felt guilty, both for dragging him into this mess and for not stopping it when I could have. I thought it was over, but the silence that followed said otherwise. We sat on the couch, and I could tell something was off from the way he kept glancing away, hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. He didn't say it at first, just this weird silence hanging between us, thick enough to choke on. Finally, he just blurted it out. I don't think it's okay anymore. The way your mom crossed the line tonight. All the time. With everyone. His voice was low, almost strained, like he was forcing himself to say it. It makes me uncomfortable. And not just that one weird moment. Everything she does feels like she's invading my space, my life. I froze. For so long, I'd been the one playing defense, making excuses. She doesn't know better, I'd say. It's not intentional. But hearing it from him, hearing that blunt truth in the quiet of our living room, it felt different. It wasn't my burden to carry alone anymore. Or at least, I didn't have to pretend it was okay. I didn't say anything at first, because part of me wanted to argue, like I always did, to protect my mom, or myself, maybe. But the words stuck there, like a slap. And for once, I didn't want to wave them away. He kept going, voice softer. I don't want you to think I'm attacking you, or her. But these boundaries, she ignores them constantly. And I've been trying to swallow it, laugh it off, but I can't anymore. I looked down at my hands, suddenly aware of how tightly I was gripping the couch. I was done explaining her behavior like it was some allergic reaction I just had to live with. Like it was normal. That night, something shifted inside me. I caught this flash of disgust. Not at him, not really, but at the whole situation. At how I'd been tangled in it, trying to smooth over all the bruises without stopping the hits. I realized that if I kept doing that, I'd lose myself somewhere between their expectations and excuses. Okay, I finally said, voice quiet but firm. I hear you. It wasn't an apology. It was a start. A small, hard first step toward something different. Toward taking control. He looked at me, surprised, maybe relieved. That means a lot, he said. I could see it in his eyes. Hope, maybe. But I also saw the weight that hadn't lifted yet. All the things we both still had to deal with. I thought about how long I'd let this go, how much I'd sacrificed pretending it was fine, that it was love filtering through chaos. But love isn't supposed to feel like a trap. For the first time, I wasn't just the girl trying to fix everything and everyone. I was already starting to be something else. Someone who could hold her own line, who wouldn't just wait for the next mess to hit and bend over backwards to catch it. The room still felt heavy, but somehow, the weight on my shoulders felt different. Not looser, maybe, but sharper, more defined. Like I knew what I had to do next. I looked up at him and said quietly, "We need to figure this out, together. But I'm not letting this keep happening, to me or you. Not anymore." He nodded, but his eyes flickered with questions I wasn't ready to answer. And neither was I. I thought we were past the worst of it. But that night, as the silence settled back between us, I knew it wasn't over. It was just the beginning of something I couldn't yet see. I sat across from Jen, my best friend, at that cramped coffee shop where every conversation felt too loud and too close. My hands trembled a little, the way they did when I was scared or angry, but this time wasn't quite either. It was something sharper, like curiosity mixed with a slow-burning guilt. I told her everything about my mom. How she always had to be perfect in front of others, how she'd snap if she thought I embarrassed her, the way she twisted stories to make herself look better. Jen was quiet, listening, not judging, just nodding like I was pulling apart a knot she'd seen before. Then she looked me dead in the eyes and said something I didn't expect. "We need to show her how ridiculous she looks." I blinked. "What? Like call her out?" She shook her head slightly, a small grin creeping up. "No, not straight up. Too risky. But a little mirror. You know, something harmless, but humiliating enough she can't ignore it. That way she feels what we feel, without it blowing up on us." I stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "Mirror?" I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. Because, honestly, the last thing I wanted was to make things worse. But part of me ached for her to see herself differently. To see me differently. "Yeah," Jen said. "It's not about revenge. It's about reflection. Making her see what we saw." I felt a flicker of something inside me, like a bug crawling under my skin. I wanted it. I wanted her to squirm for once. But alongside that, the guilt crept in. Was I really ready to drag my mom through the mud, to set her up for public embarrassment, no matter how small? Would it make me as bad as the person I hated her for being? Jen leaned in, lowering her voice. "I've got an idea. It's simple, low stakes. Trust me, it's harmless. You just have to do it with me." I nodded slowly, unsure but desperate for something to shift. "Okay," I said. "Tell me." The plan she laid out was oddly brilliant. We'd find a small group of our mutual friends, people who didn't know the whole backstory, and we'd set up a situation where Mom would try to shine, like she always did. Except this time, she'd be caught in a tiny lie, just enough to make her flinch. Not enough to throw her out, nothing cruel, but enough to pull the curtain back for a second. Jen was careful to stress how controlled it would be. No public meltdowns, no harsh accusations. Just a small mirror held up so that for a moment, she'd see her own reflection clearly. And that, Jen promised, was enough. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning out every detail, every risk, every word. I felt a nervous energy build up in my chest, like I was gearing up for a fight I didn't completely want, but somehow knew I needed. Every scenario, every what if, made me breath a little shallower, but also more resolute. Maybe this was the only way to shake her out of whatever cage she was locked in. But then she popped into my mind. The real Mom. The one who maybe wasn't cruel on purpose but scared and lonely underneath it all. And my throat tightened because as much as I wanted her to see, to get it, I still didn't want to hurt her. Jen's voice cut through my swirl of doubts. "If you don't do this, nothing changes. You keep getting crushed under her bullshit, and she keeps walking around like she's the queen. You deserve better." I looked down at my coffee, the bitter taste matching the twist in my gut. I was about to step into something messy, something I might regret. But I also knew that the longer I waited, the more damage would pile up. Finally, I swallowed and said, "Let's do it." It wasn't excitement exactly. It was more like holding my breath before diving into cold water. Scary, but necessary. Jen smiled, but it wasn't pure joy. It was relief mixed with this quiet tension, like she, too, knew we were opening a door that might never close again. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next, but I felt the tiniest spark of hope flicker in me, the thought that maybe, just maybe, this mirror could crack something real between us. And in that moment, I knew things were about to change. I just didn't know how much or how fast. That night, we had a family dinner at my mom's place. You know, usual stuff. Her boyfriend was there, my mom smiling like she owned the room, and me sitting there trying not to stir up anything. Then my best friend shows up, not on the guest list. "Oh, I just happened to be nearby," she said with that fake grin. It was clear from the start she had a plan. She walked over to my mom's boyfriend, the guy she'd barely met, and started chatting him up like they were old friends. The way she laughed, leaned in just a little too close. It wasn't subtle. I could feel the tension jump the second she did it. My mom's smile dropped, a flicker of panic crossing her face that I'd never seen before. Her eyes darted between us, trying to read what was going on. I watched her fumble for words, halting and awkward, like the confident woman I'd known was suddenly losing her footing. It was almost cruel to see her like that, but damn, it felt good. For once, she was the one blushing, the one struggling to keep the situation together, and I didn't interrupt her scramble. My best friend kept it up, sweet and sly, acting completely innocent, but with those sharp edges underneath. Every word she tossed at my mom's boyfriend was loaded, like silent bullets only we could see. And my mom, who usually commanded every conversation, could barely meet my friend's eyes. It was uncomfortable watching her crack, that poise slipping away one tiny bit at a time. I hated it and loved it all at once. The boyfriend looked confused but flattered, glancing at my mom like, "Is this normal?" I could hear my mom's half-laughs, shaky and forced, like she was realizing her control wasn't as absolute as she liked to pretend. It was a mirror reflecting all the times she'd humiliated me, but the roles had flipped. I caught my mom's gaze for a brief second. There was something raw there under the surface, fear, embarrassment, maybe even regret. I doubted she would admit it, but it was there. And the whole room shifted, the air thick with a dangerous awkwardness that no one knew how to break. Somewhere in that tension, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt knotting together. It wasn't just revenge. It was complicated, like proving a point, but also realizing how far that point could hurt. My friend smiled, just a little too wide, her eyes gleaming with that dark knowing. I could tell this was the kind of scene she'd scripted for herself, calling out the unspoken, making everyone uncomfortable in the only way they understood. My mom finally cleared her throat, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the damage was done. The ease was gone. The carefully built image cracked, just a little, and she knew it. I didn't say a word. I just watched it unfold, letting the silence stretch, feeling the power in that pause. It was strange, not triumph exactly, but something close, something real. I thought things had shifted between us. Maybe this was the moment she'd start seeing me differently, or maybe not. Whatever the case, I knew this night wasn't going to end quietly. And then, just when I thought I could breathe again, my mom leaned close to my friend and whispered something so low I barely caught it. Something loaded. The way my friend's smile flattened in response told me this wasn't over. I realized then, flipping the game might be satisfying, but it was just the start of a much messier fight. She slammed the door behind her so hard the whole house seemed to shake. The sound hung there, sharp and cutting through the quiet like a scream. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the echo fade, my chest tight, too tight to breathe right. I heard her shouting as she stormed down the stairs, accusing everyone, me, Dad, even my brother, of mocking her. Like somehow we were all in on some cruel joke at her expense. It wasn't like that, never was. But she didn't wait for an answer. She didn't even want one. Just finger-pointing and wild accusations. She didn't see the years of silent stares, the way we picked our words carefully around her, pretending everything was okay. I remember looking at my dad across the room, his face pale and defeated. He didn't say a word. No one did. I could feel the weight of every unsaid thing, everything buried under years of pretending, grinding down like a slow fire. It was all in that sudden heat in my gut, the one where all the grief and anger and exhaustion swirl together, tight and raw. She kept yelling, voice cracking on the edges, accusing me of laughing behind her back. But I wasn't laughing. Not really. Year after year, she made it impossible not to feel like the punchline, like being around her was some kind of test we all failed. And now, here she was, acting like we were the monsters. I didn't answer. I just looked back at her, calm and steady, waiting for a breath in that storm. Finally, she stopped, chest heaving with fury, eyes wild with something I didn't want to see. I said it quiet but clear. Now you know how it feels. The words hung between us, heavier than anything I'd ever spoken. It wasn't a taunt. It wasn't hatred. It was just the quiet truth, laid bare in that moment. The kind you don't say when you want to hurt someone, but when you want them to understand. Her silence was louder than every fake laugh she'd ever used. I saw her shoulders drop, like maybe the fight left her with nothing left to throw. And then she turned and left, not another word, just the soft click of the door closing behind her. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling a strange mix of power and grief, like I'd finally crossed some invisible line. Years of tension, all that weight of anger and pain and disappointment, collapsed in a second. But underneath it, a quiet sort of relief bloomed, sharp and unexpected, like breathing through a storm. I didn't know what would come next. Didn't know if this would change anything, or if we were just digging a bigger hole. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't shrinking away from her anymore. Still, the silence that filled the room after she left screamed louder than any words could. I thought maybe it was over, but I knew deep down it wasn't. Not yet. The messages came like clockwork. First one a day after the argument, then another the next morning, barely giving me time to breathe. "You've changed," she wrote. "I don't even know you anymore." Then a few hours later, "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I read them, once, twice. That was it. No reply. I could feel the usual knot in my chest trying to settle in, trying to pull me back into the old pattern. Answer, explain, apologize. But something in me was different now, tighter, colder. I didn't want to get drawn in. Her words, loaded with that quiet bitterness, didn't have the power they used to. I never blocked her. That would have been too easy. But I didn't engage either. I just let the notifications pile up. Sometimes I opened her messages, stared at the words, and felt that familiar sting of guilt flicker. But I swallowed it down every time. No reply. Silence. That was my new boundary. She probably thought I was ignoring her on purpose. Maybe I was. Maybe I needed her to see that I wasn't that person anymore. The one who'd beg for forgiveness over some imagined slight. The one who'd take on all the blame just to keep the peace. That version's gone. The weird thing is, the silence settled over me like a thick fog at first. I found myself wondering if I'd made a mistake, if I had doomed whatever thread was left between us. But as the days passed, that fog began to lift, replaced by something sharper, clearer. A quiet confidence, like finally throwing off a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Every time her message came through, it felt like her trying to pull me back into a fight I didn't want. But I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't apologizing. The anger, the disappointment she tried to lace into those texts started to feel less like a threat and more like background noise. One afternoon, I sat on my couch, my phone buzzing again. The screen lit up with, "You never call anymore." I'm so disappointed. For a long moment, I just stared at it and then locked the phone without a word. It wasn't about her disappointment. It was about me finally standing up for myself. I wasn't sure if she realized how cold I'd gotten. Or maybe she did, and that was why her messages became sharper, like verbal darts. I didn't care. This wasn't about hurting her. It was about not letting her hurt me anymore. I caught myself thinking about the past, those nights when I'd lie awake replaying arguments, twisting myself into knots, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. It used to feel like a punishment I deserved. Now it just felt like exhaustion. I didn't know her my peace, my sanity. The sadness lingered in slow waves. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, like missing a version of yourself you don't think you'll get back. I missed the idea of us, the way things were supposed to be. But I knew I had to let that go, even if it hurt. There was something deeply ironic about the whole thing. How cutting off the conversation, the emotional bait she kept throwing, actually made me feel more alive. Free, even, in a way I hadn't been for a long time. I was learning that distance didn't have to mean defeat. I'm not saying I wasn't scared. I was. Scared of losing her completely. Scared that maybe I'd made a permanent crack in something that couldn't be fixed. But the more I sat with that fear, the less it controlled me. I realized I was stronger than the silence between us. She wanted the old me, the one who'd fold under pressure, who'd take blame just to keep fragile peace. But I wasn't that person anymore, and I wasn't going back. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my own terms. I wanted to send one last message, a clear line in the sand. But I didn't. Because sometimes, the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. I thought it was over. But as I sat there, phone in hand, waiting for the next buzz, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. The doorbell rang just as I was about to sit down with my laptop. I froze, heart beating faster, then forced myself to stay calm before I got up. When I opened it, there she was, Mom. Same tired smile, the one she always used when trying to smooth things over like nothing ever happened. Hey, she said, voice light, like she'd just popped by to borrow sugar or chat about the weather. I thought I'd drop in. It's been a while. I stepped aside, made room, but didn't invite her inside. Hi, I said, voice steady. Come in. She walked into the living room like she owned the place, looking around like nothing had changed, like the months of silence meant nothing. I sat down on the couch and gestured to the chair across from me. She caught the invitation, crossing the room slowly. Her eyes flicked to the little plant I'd bought the week she disappeared, then to the pictures on the wall. Happy faces, unreachable times. I watched her mask that flicker of something. Regret. Maybe, but it was gone in an instant. So, she started, smoothing her skirt. How have you been? I figured maybe we could reconnect. She said it like it was no big deal, like she hadn't disappeared without a word, like she hadn't left me to figure things out on my own. Part of me wanted to snap, to shout everything I'd been holding back, but I swallowed it down. I remembered how angry outbursts never got me anything but guilt later. So I kept my voice calm. I've been fine, I said. Busy with work, life. I didn't look at her. Instead, I focused on the pattern in the rug, steadying myself. She nodded, like she was trying to follow some script. I've missed you. I want to make things right. I swallowed again, feeling that old ache of wanting to believe her. But I also felt the woman I'd become. The one who kept boundaries now and didn't just hop back into old, broken routines. Let's be clear, I said. This isn't the easy friendship or whatever we had before. My voice didn't waver, but inside, there was that flicker of nostalgia, the way she used to read me bedtime stories, or the time she picked me up from school when it rained. Those moments never truly left me, even if she did. She blinked, a little caught off guard. Of course, I understand. I'm not asking for everything back overnight. She sounded sincere, but I wasn't ready to let her back in just because she showed up on my doorstep. Not this time. I'm willing to talk, I said carefully, but it's on my terms. No more silence, no more disappearing. She reached out, like maybe to touch my hand, but stopped herself. Maybe she remembered, or maybe she was scared I'd pull away. I don't want to lose you again, she whispered. I looked at her then, really looked, and felt something quiet and steady settle inside me. Strength I hadn't realized I had. She talked like a mother, but I listened like a woman, not a child. I don't want to lose you either, I said. But I'm done being left behind. She nodded slowly, like she was hearing me for the first time. I'm sorry, she said, voice breaking just a little. For a second, I almost felt that old girl inside me reaching for forgiveness, for the family she always wanted. But I squeezed it shut. We sat there in silence, both of us breathing in the space between words. I knew this was just the beginning, and that trust wasn't something you handed over. It was earned. Slowly. And maybe I wasn't ready to give it. The doorbell rang again, but this time, it was unexpected. I looked up, furrowing my brow, because it wasn't the kind of timing you prepare for. She glanced toward the door, a flicker of something, fear, in her eyes. I didn't move. I just sat there, waiting. When Aunt Lisa called last week, I wasn't ready to answer. But I did, and hearing her voice was something I didn't expect. It was calm, like she'd been carrying a weight that was finally easing. She told me Mom had started therapy. I sat there, stunned. It wasn't a headline I'd been waiting for, but just knowing she was doing something about it. That was a quiet kind of relief. Lisa said it was a friend of Mom's who finally called her out on everything, told her she couldn't keep running from what she'd done. I wondered if it was the same friend we all used to tiptoe around, pretending she wasn't so angry beneath the surface. Mom finally admitted she needed help. Not redemption. That would be too much to expect, but accountability. And maybe that was enough for now. I didn't know what I wanted to feel. Part of me pitted Mom for having to break all those walls she built around herself. Walls that kept everyone out, but also trapped her in. It's strange, because she never really talked about feelings, not even the bad ones. But I guess now she has to, or at least someone's making her. The relief didn't come with fireworks or some grand peace. It was quieter. It was in the way Aunt Lisa's voice softened when she said, "She's saying the things she never said before." Like the past still hung there, heavy and messy, but maybe for the first time, it wasn't locked away in silence. I thought about that friend who confronted her, the one brave enough to name the things no one else dared. Part of me hated her for stirring it up, but I also knew that without her, Mom might have stayed stuck forever. I wonder if Mom hated her too, or if there was a flicker of gratitude underneath all that anger. I'm not sure what Mom actually said in those therapy sessions. I imagine it was painful. She has to face things she buried deep, things we all tried to forget. It didn't fix the past, no, but it meant she'd finally stopped pretending it never happened. That was something. It was the first step off the edge, maybe. Even now, I catch myself holding my breath, waiting for something to come crashing down again. Old habits die hard, and I don't trust that this time will be different. Still, there's a small part of me that wants to hope. Not a big, crazy hope, but a fragile one that maybe, just maybe, she's trying. I wasn't ready to think about what that meant for any kind of future between us. The hurt is too fresh, and the scars too deep. But hearing that she was in therapy, that she faced the parts of herself she always ran from, felt like the start of something none of us dared to imagine before. Like maybe the broken pieces weren't meant to stay scattered forever. I hung up feeling a little lighter, and also heavier, like a door had cracked open just enough for some air to slip through. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, not sure if I was relieved or scared. Relief that she finally saw herself in the mirror, pity for the years lost to silence, hope for what might still come. Maybe one day, we could talk without it tearing everything apart. But for now, the quiet between us was different. It wasn't the silence of pretending anymore. It was the silence of waiting. Waiting to see if healing was possible, or just another kind of letting go. I saw her at the coffee shop downtown, the one we used to go to when things weren't so messy between us. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older somehow, like the weight of everything finally settled in. I was standing in line when she walked in, and our eyes met. No shock, no anger, just a quiet recognition. I thought about walking past, pretending I didn't see her, but my feet moved before my mind caught up. She nodded at me, a small, almost shy gesture. It wasn't the same person who'd torn everything apart, and I wasn't the same kid who broke under her. I guess we both had changed in those months apart. We decided to sit down, not out of a need to fix anything, but maybe to just be. The table between us felt like a safe distance, not too close, not too far. She ordered a black coffee, no sugar, just like I remembered. I had a tea, not because I cared what she was drinking, but because it softened the moment. There was no apology from her, no blaming from me. We just spoke honestly about things that mattered, small stuff, really. I told her about the job I'd taken, how I'd finally moved out on my own. She listened without interrupting, which was different than before. In return, she asked about my plans, genuinely curious. When I said I wasn't planning on repairing what we lost, her face stayed calm. No hurt, maybe a hint of relief. She admitted she wasn't ready to be the person I needed either. Not then, not ever maybe. And that was it. No bitterness, just the kind of understanding that comes from really seeing someone for who they are, and deciding to let it be enough. I told her, quietly, that she'd never be the mother I needed, but somehow, she'd taught me what I never wanted to become. That line caught her off guard, and I saw a flicker of pain in her eyes. Maybe regret? Not apology, just recognition. We talked about the past with no blame, no excuses. I shared bits about how tough it had been, how I stumbled to find my own way. She didn't try to soften my words or fix things with platitudes. She just nodded, like she was agreeing that some things couldn't be undone, only accepted. When it was time to leave, I felt lighter than I thought possible. Like a chapter had quietly closed without a headline or dramatic finale. We said goodbye, and I didn't try to keep the door open. I walked away with a strange gratitude, a relief, really, that this contact wasn't about dragging old wounds back up, but just two people acknowledging where they'd been. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. But this felt right. No promises, no lingering doubts. Just enough peace to move forward. As I stepped outside into the afternoon, I realized I wasn't running anymore. Not from her, not from myself. The silence after our talk wasn't empty. It was full of something quieter, stronger. I thought it was over, but it felt more like freedom.